as a young child, a youngster, so to speak, I had a cleft tongue, what they call tongue-tied, and that made me very shy, inward drawn, and I went to drawing to cover up a lot, and because of the ridicule of that. And comes to mind, James Earl Jones, the actor, he had a speech impediment. And I think that forces the individual to sort of use his imagination a little bit more. But in any case, it was in 1950 that the President of the United States wanted to start an experimental program. And he asked my mentor, Rex Gorley, who was a famous black artist at the time, to start a program called Studio, Spring Street Studio in Princeton, New Jersey. And this program was entitled the Princeton Plan. And what happened was he initiated by selecting local black kids, a few, that had some potential in the arts. And I was one chosen, and white children or kids from the surrounding area. And what happened was that they brought them together, and that was the initiation of precursor to busing for to desegregate the schools in the South. So that was my initial opening to art. And I come to find out later on, some years later, that Rex knew a photographer, Gordon Parks, pretty famous photographer and writer, poet, and et cetera. Rex had given Gordon Parks his first show in his gallery, which was located in Chicago at the time. So my training came along those lines, and I like painting, and I did painting for a long time, but it was a little later on that I read Gordon Parks' book, Choice of Weapons, and I was so enthusiastic about that I ran to my instructor, which had become a very close friend at that time, and I told him about my reading about Gordon Parks, and I said, I want to shoot like that. He was kind of disappointed because I had been taking painting lessons with him for so long. And he said he knew Gordon Parks, and he had given Gordon Parks his first show. But in any case, as far as unknown artists, I remember, well, at least I'd like to interject that when I was really young, my father, who 35 years as an auto mechanic, and one of his partners, my mother, she worked 30 years with General Motors, assembly line. They have a car, new cars, and he used to collect cars and redo them and refurbish them. And he had in the basement metallic paints. And I remember one time I was painting my bicycle, and this was like early 50s. And I had dripped some paint onto some newspaper on the floor. And I thought that this was a unique idea. And I was going to show it to my art instructor, Rex, but I never did it. And I wonder, and the reason why I mention that is because I think in some respects that being unknown, that might have something to do with destiny. And I guess it wasn't my destiny because at that time I knew nothing of Jackson Pollock, who did all of the drip paintings. But I kind of think that, you know, and now today, not recently, but over the past decade, I've been working with metallics, and so things evolve and come back.
I remember a series you had on the American flag from
Yes.
quite some years ago.
Yes, I bring that today. It's not really indicative of all the work that I do, but or the different types of work that I do, because there isn't one set theme. But I wanted to bring that up because the flag has been an iconic symbol for artists. You know, I think of Jasper Johns and several other artists who worked that theme. And in this particular picture, I was in the early, I believe, or late 60s, I believe it was. I was under contract with Black Star Publishing Company, and in conjunction with them and Life magazine, I was sent to Detroit to take pictures of youth gangs. And I spent 6 months out there, and I found it very disturbing that so many youth, especially black youth, were dying, killing each other. And this picture, in a way, nothing has really changed, you know, and I see a lot of that today. And so what you have here is you have a painting of an upside-down flag. An upside-down flag internationally signals distress. And so in some respects, we might have a young youth here blindfolded who has faith in America. I love America myself, but here we have the consequence, the dichotomy or the conflict of being an American, loving America, and at the same time not having faith in America because of the distress that you're under. And so you see that, and that's what I wanted to get across in the picture, because we have the traditional American button-down white corporate shirt, but at the same time a black tie, which signals almost remorse, you know.
What has been the reaction to this particular
Well, it's
piece?
provocative. It's provocative, and it signals a lot of different messages for different people, and I think that's the way art is supposed to be. And that brings to mind Gordon Parks' picture that he had taken, which is almost a historic classic. It is from a parody of a classic called American Gothic, where you have two white individuals from the middle country, one holding, I believe it's a pitchfork or mop, and well, actually the mop is being held by a laborer at a government building in Washington, and that's the picture that Gordon Parks took with the flag in the background. So it meant something to him, and I don't think I was thinking about that when I did my painting, but there is a whole series of paintings. Another one in that series would be the Liberty, the Statue of Liberty, and the reason why I did that was because the sculpture of the Statue of Liberty, the sculptor, I believe his name is Francis Bartilli or Bardilli. I'm not sure now. But in any case, he originally got the idea of a draped woman from Egypt to be at the starting place of the Suez Canal. So I thought it was interesting that it was a big controversy for a long time whether or not the initial Statue of Liberty was a black woman. So what I did was I drew from that, and I came up with an expressionist painting where I put flag, splattered some paint, and so forth. So, in the picture of the Brooklyn Bridge, it sort of speaks for itself. It is an expressionist painting. However, in the cables of the Brooklyn Bridge, you'll find that the flag is extravagant there, and you'll see that it's covered by the lines of the cable. So to me, that was again an expression of our iconic symbol being caught up in Americanism. One that I have here is called Shop Closed, which I had taken, I guess, a couple decades ago. But here we have today the flag with the sign Shop Closed, and now we're in terrible economic difficulties. And I thought that I brought the photo up because it's sort of relevant even today, you know. And lastly, I have a photo, and incidentally, the process is that I will change these photos into paintings at a later date, and they may not resemble what the photo looks like, but this is a starting point where you combine photography with painting. And in the picture of, you have, I guess, one of the most American symbols, the flower box in the window. And what can be more homelier than that? But still, if the picture is looked into a little more deeply, you'll see that the plants or flowers are decaying, and the flag is old and ruffled. So these images maybe have a meaning for me, but I don't know. But this is why I took them, and this is why I will be painting them.
What is it that we mean when we say an unknown artist? Unknown to whom is kind of a question that comes to my mind.
Well, I can think back, at a time that was decisive for me. I love jazz, and I just get all kinds of improvisational jive from that. Listening to John Coltrane, Dexter Gordon, and so forth, Miles Davis, and Miles is a great study because he had so many different genres in jazz. Whenever something that everybody took a hold of, he would all of a sudden change to something new and different. And he was always one step ahead, whether he couldn't care less whether anybody liked it or not. And I remember I used to visit the clubs on Avenue A, B, and C down in the Village back in the early 60s. And the Jazz Messengers, Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers, were playing at the time. And the piano player, Bobby Timmons, he would stay during the breaks and just play by himself or play to himself. And beautiful bouts. I mean, it was a better show than the actual show. The show would be so crowded and hundreds of people, and everybody would leave during the breaks, and he'd almost be there alone. And I was only maybe only one viewing at that time. And I thought to myself that this man was really in love with the process, with just doing the outcome of the music. And at some time later, he wasn't very much known at that time, but they almost gave him genius status, and he wrote several classic songs to date. So that is, to me, the meaning of being unknown. But at the same time, you get to be known. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that I like about artists. I study some artists, and I really enjoy the work of Winslow Homer, who for years he wasn't accepted by the art world, at least his work, and he didn't care too much about selling. And he did his improvisationals with watercolor, and he didn't care what anybody really saw them or anything, and he became one of the best watercolor artists in the world. So at one point I did corporate work. I worked for all of the oil companies, and to me that was a compromise of my work, of my inner beliefs. And today, I feel that I will never go back to compromising my work again. And so, to me, it really doesn't matter to be known, but the most important thing to me is not to compromise your feeling or the work that you want to do.
The important thing here is the work.
Is the work.
Is the craft.
I agree with
practice.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I learned that from being a mentor or apprentice to Joseph Brown. He was the sculptor in residence at Princeton University for a number of years. And even today with my work, I do sculpturing on layered paper or canvas.